I'm joined in the studio by a member of the Township and Rural Entrepreneurship Startup20 South Africa, Bulelani Balabala. Good to have you, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a task force.
Yeah.
You're a task force. We are all task forcing, brought into the sting of the G20. Yeah. However, suppose your focus is a little bit different. But we have been having conversations about access to markets. We've been having conversations about access to finance, right? Why does this one matter?
I think for me, it really matters because I think what it does is it brings policy in an inclusive environment. I think in most cases, we've operated in spaces where, I guess in silos, where various departments and initiatives were operating, pulling out, making decisions that inform policy to a certain degree while frustrating other parts of the ecosystem. And I think for us, having been brought in, I think a certain piece of the bigger picture, which is this G20, which is the Startup20 as a task force member, I think some of the key things that we sought to bring to the party really was the on-the-ground real information on what's actually happening at a grassroots level from a micro enterprise, formal and informal businesses that are operating within the country as well as small businesses, because that then becomes our focus. But I think like what you're saying now, the key thing really, after all of this is all said and done, that is really going to be the dipstick measurement of whether this was all a show and all of us were dress rehearsing to perform, is really going to be the implementation, which then becomes the big questionable piece, because to implement anything, especially at a township or a township economy level, you need to be deeply intentional. Because the reality is doing any work in the township is an inconvenience. I'll tell you that much, because I've been doing that work for 11 years. I've been 21 years a township entrepreneur. You need to be deeply intentional. Yeah. And the reason why it's inconvenience is because of the lack of infrastructure, the lack of market access that you're talking about, the lack of the most basic thing like information. So when an entrepreneur or a micro enterprise says, in actual fact, my biggest challenge is financing, you might find that because the layers have not been peeled off, I'm asking for them to supply tax clearance when what they actually need is a business coach to help them align themselves. Right. So the deep question that we need to then ask ourselves, especially whether it's at a B20 level, it's at a SU20 level, it's at a G20 level, is have we taken the time to pause back and actually consider ourselves as actually informal to how the formalized the township economy actually works.
It's a very important thing that you bring up, because we always speak of micro enterprises, SMMEs, as if it's all the same thing. It's not, because as you put it, at a startup level, what Ms. Mabuza there is talking about might not be applicable to you, because she says, well, you must have a balance sheet. You're an innovator, you're a startup. You don't have a balance sheet. You don't even know whether there's a market for this product that you're creating, because you're being innovative. And we bring you all around the same table, but we are speaking from different levels.
No, we definitely are. And I think for me, the reason why I talk about intention, I don't talk about it in the approach that sometimes people receive it that says, man, they want handouts or giveaway, or they just want us to make it soft. No. We're not advocating for that. I think for me, we know a couple of things. Entrepreneurship should always remain tough because it's competitive, and that's what drives innovation, competitive and tough environments. But however, when I talk about being deeply intentional is when you understand the language breakdown between two seams. And I'll make you an example. It's when a large organization says we've got over 200 million worth of developmental capital that we want to disperse. On the other side, a year later or a year later, 12 months later, when they're reporting back to Exco or even to government, and they go back there and they say, well, we could only get 20% because everybody else didn't qualify. Yeah. And the gap between that is the intentionality that says, why didn't they qualify? Let us not change our compliance measures, because compliance is what holds everything together. But are we able to then give provisional approval on individuals who actually meet the criteria? But you might find that it doesn't have a letter of good standing from the Department of Labor. But because the reality of it is, to start and sustain a business, would cost you anything between about 7 to about 20,000 rand a year without even having any customer base or client. Yeah. That's from filing your annual returns with CIPC, getting it registered, registering with the industry bodies, registering with stars, and then even if you make no money, you still need to then report those zeros. We're all having one conversations, but at different levels. But because we're talking past each other, we are not understanding how to bring others along for the journey. And the real deep thing about this is, Being intentional means that you just do a little bit more work.
Yeah.
But if a little bit more work is what is needed for us to unlock the next tier level of growth, then that's what we need to do. So my firm view, Thabo, this afternoon is to simply say, we all have seen as we read the headlines every other week, JSE-listed organizations either retrenching or letting staff members go. They've hit the ceiling. The next frontier of growth is within the township and the township economy. But we've equally seen, on the other hand, how they've gone in and they've left with their tail in between their legs. Because you need to approach it with a sense of humility. So which is why then I clearly say, be deeply intentional, operate from a place of trust, bring everyone along for the journey, then everyone enjoys the win together in the long term. That is what inclusivity is. Other than that, then it's all conversations, because on the other side is you make capital available for me, but you don't make a growth available to me. That is still not inclusive.
Yeah. Having done, of course, your footwork as a task force on the ground and having spoken to startups, especially at the township level, what would be your message that they've told you to say, bring this message to the G20 forum?
I mean, I think for me, the most important message really that we've picked up from the guys is make the information palatable. Number one. Number two, we don't understand what this whole G20 hoo-ha is, because all we're trying to do is chase for month end. Simplify market access to us and simplify how we are able to trade at this level and access opportunities at this level. So while you talk about the bigness and numbers, understand that we need the basics to be able to move around. The third tier level is opening up streams, especially from a sales perspective, from a market access perspective, taking on the top up and the bottom up approach.
Yes.
That says we want to do cross-sell across our communities, but also want to do business with large corporations. Are they open enough to do business with us? But also, most importantly, take us along for the journey. Because although they might take a certain percentage of their BE spend and put it towards enterprise supply development, but at the end of that, no one has actually questioned all the billions that go to enterprise development, where they've landed those businesses. Yeah. So I think for me, those are some of the key things. And then I think over and above that is to say, they are ready, they are willing, they've built the businesses. The most important thing that needs to now be opened up is the lay.
Bulelani, I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much,
for
sir.
coming on. That is a member of the Township and Rural Entrepreneurship Startup 20 South Africa.